This is Lessons Learned, and I'm your host, Matt Kennard, CEO of Better Lesson. Join me as we dig in with visionary state and district level leaders who share our mission to support every K-12 educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners. Lessons Learned is brought to you by Better Lesson. Let's get started. Okay, Better Lesson fam, it's good to see you all. Lessons Learned Season 2. We are going to continue with some incredible folks, and I'm just super excited to be joined today by Mac Beaton. He is the director of CTE for Henrico County Public Schools in Virginia. And, you know, CTE has been a really important topic for us in this season as we talk about what it means to think about the portrait of a graduate and what it means to think about college and career readiness for students. So, Mac, it's so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Listen, we are thrilled about it. And I think one of the things that we love to get into before we do anything else is what is the journey that has brought you to be today a director of CTE? People get into education for so many reasons. We love to hear the story or your story of entry.
Well, my story of entry is really a little bit different from a typical someone entering the educational world. When I graduated from high school, I'm going to brag a little bit. I came in second in my class, but I don't want anybody to get excited. It was three of us. So somebody had to be in the middle along the way. But the bottom line is, in reality, everybody was telling me I was going to go to college. You're going to go to college. You're going to do great things, etc. It was almost like college and doing great things were a synonymous term. But the trouble was, nobody ever asked me, number one, did I want to go to college? Number two, no one ever asked me why go to college. And number three, no one ever told me how I was going to get there, how I was going to pay for it, all those pieces of the puzzle. And so it really kind of left me in the dilemma because I knew I could not afford to go to college. And to be honest, I was not mature enough to go to college coming out of high school. In reality, looking back at it now, I know that would have not been the best choice for me. But anyway, my mother gave me the best piece of information. She said, whatever you do in life, it's okay, as long as you continue to learn and do it to the best of your ability. So the smartest choice I ever made, I actually went into the Norfolk Naval Shipyard as an apprentice electrician. So while I was there, I was able to save up money. The apprenticeship actually allowed me to earn an associate's degree from a community college, which I could then apply towards college if I wanted to. And so, I'm going along this pathway thinking I'm going to be an electrician at the Navy Yard. And then one day I said, wait a minute, I think I could go to college now. I'm ready. And so I went to Virginia Tech for engineering. Loved every minute of it. Actually was working during the summer as an electrician at a meatpacking plant. They had already promised me a job as the plant engineer when I graduated, and I'm getting ready to graduate. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. I was not happy. So I think that's where the maturity actually came in. I've been, I'm actually, 24 years old at this point in time, 25 years old. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I can't see myself living this life for the rest of my life and feeling like I've done what I'm here for. So I went to the career counselors at Tech and took all these tests. It was a whole day of testing back then. And they came back when it was all said and done. They said, yep, you're off the charts in mechanical skills. Engineering is the perfect pathway for you. And I remember looking at the lady and said, yeah, what else you got? Because I'm not happy. And she goes, well, you also scored really high in religion and education. I go, what, like preaching and teaching? But then as I started thinking about it, I really enjoyed my time in the Navy Yard and college helping everybody else that was struggling because the learning actually came easy to me. I understood it. The engineering piece, from what I had done at Navy Yard, I could apply it. It made sense. It was real easy. And I understood how to tie it all together. And I was able to help other people connect those dots. And I thought, I'll give teaching a try. So December.
Not preaching.
Yeah.
Not preaching.
Well, and the thing of it is, in reality, preaching and teaching, what's the difference? You're both selling what you believe. And so I walked into that classroom and I have not worked in 40 years. So fell in love.
I love that story, and, one of the reasons I love that story is I think that a lot of students would resonate with that story, and we talk a lot about how you have to be college and career ready, you have to know X, Y, and Z, but to a certain extent, it's about giving folks the skills at graduation to then make discernments along the way around what matters to them and what they want. So I love that story because I think it's one that should be celebrated and talked about more that we fail to along the way. So you haven't worked in 40 years. You're now the director of CTE in your district. Talk to me a little bit about some of the innovative models that you all have brought in, because I know workforce partnerships are something that you've really tried to prioritize in the work. I'm guessing because of some of your own experiences and seeing how that interaction with the real world actually can help shape and form a lot of opinions on what you want to do. And that almost never happens for high school students, um, especially Regency Mall. Tell us about it.
Partnerships are key to the success, I think, of anything. If you think about what we do in life, if someone tells you to do something, you feel like you have to. But if someone's doing it with you, then you become part of that. And every business partner out there that we have is very eager to hire our young people. And they used to come to me all the time, like, I want to get in front of young people. And I'm like, look, if we're talking to them would fix the problem, we do that 6.5 hours a day, problem solved. But you need to get involved and come in and do this with us. Um, and I can give you several examples of how we have done that. But what I've found is the power of involving the partnerships starts off with first their definition of partnership. Most school divisions will think of a partnership as, hey, we're getting ready to start a new team and we need jerseys. And if you give me $3,000, we'll buy the jerseys. I'll put your name on the back and you can be one of our business partners. Well, yes, that's very, very nice. But my definition of a partnership, that's a handout. And we like to think of a partnership as a handshake. And we have a philosophy in Henrico County. It's really kind of worked in my favor. But at first I was thinking, boy, something must be wrong with me because I will never ask for anything. It's just I'm not going to go to you and say, hey, could you help us out? I will come to you and say, look, I've got young people. They're looking for opportunities. They want to work for your company. Can we figure out how I can help you? And then that growth, that partnership, I like to say it's like a perfect marriage. It's a 60-40 relationship. If both people are giving 60% of the time and expecting 40, you end up with 120%. And you're far better off than you thought you were going to be to start with. So we've done a number of projects, but you mentioned the Regency Mall project. We took a 48,000 square foot of a mall and turned it into an adult education center. Now there's so many different stories that I could go into. Number one, why put the adult ed in a mall? And I want to touch that real quick. Number one, if you're an adult and you're dropped out of school or you need to go back to school, we send you to the place that you hated to start with and expect you to be successful. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to go on a diet but you're going to be in a bakery every day. It doesn't work, so we wanted to create a place that the adult felt comfortable and like they were moving forward in life. And then to put it in a mall, you think about a mall, you go shopping. And just like you said in high school, everybody, we don't want our kids to graduate college and career ready from high school anymore. We want them to graduate enrolled, enlisted, and or employed. We want them to know what their why is. So why wouldn't that be any different for the adult world? So we wanted to create a place where the adults came in, not just seeking a GED or English as a second language, but their why and what they're going to do next with it. So we put it in a mall, kept the storefronts of the mall. And if you think about a storefront, the whole purpose of a storefront is to advertise. So we're advertising careers. And as you walk into our mall, you're walking by careers all the time. And it's like in a store, you walk by and you see something that one day you look at it the first time, walk by it again, 3 or 4 times later, you go in the store and you buy it because that's the whole concept. So the whole concept of the mall is have the adults see their future. Now, to build this out was a very unique challenge. We had 48,000 square foot that we had to demo it out, design it, and turn it into a classroom space. So we, using their partnerships, which really became key to this, we're able to do this in 10 months. And if you think about time, that's a pretty quick span. But let me give you an example of how partnerships play into this. I think one of the most significant opportunities we had, there were 261 sprinkler heads in that 48,000 foot space that had to be moved. And if you think about sprinkler heads, you can't touch them. It's life safety. You got to be certified. You got to be 18 to be certified. So kids never know. Only thing they know about, I joke about it. The only thing they knew about sprinkler heads is you can't hang clothes on it when you're in a hotel. So, the industry itself has been dying to get young people excited about how do you get into the sprinkler fitting industry. So I went to they had a job fair. They had rented a section of a hotel, and they had some really neat displays there. And the American Fire and Sprinkler Association, they had a total of 28 people show up for that first sprinkler fair that they did. And I said, and I was, me and three of my colleagues were 4 of the people there. And so we were sitting there talking, and they said, we really want to get in front of young people. And so I said, have I got an opportunity for you? I've got 261 sprinkler heads. I'm not asking you to give me anything. Can you come in? Because the mall actually became our classroom. So I have kids touch it. And I said, but we've got to do it right. Will you come in, just show us how, watch your kids do it, and then certify we did the work? And they go, oh, we'd love to do that. And so from that day, with the 28 people showing up, they came in, worked with our kids. They fell in love with what we were doing in the school system. Then they started working with their vendors. They had all the parts donated. They donated time. They were in there for kids. We moved all those sprinkler heads. And at the end of the day, the return on their investment, we did a job fair for them a year later from the time they had the 28 kids. We did that actually at the mall, and they had over 200 kids show up.
My goodness. I love that idea of experiential learning, whether it's for adults who are trying to figure out what they want to do next, or, we don't trust kids enough sometimes. And we look at it and we say, well, that's, adult, it's for safety with its sprinkler heads. But the reality is kids are hungry for opportunities, particularly those, a kid who's mechanically inclined wants to get a chance to actually try something out, to be trusted to do something that's that important. I mean, kids will rise to that occasion if you give them that experiential opportunity.
I joke about it all the time. And going back to when I was in high school, if a bus pulled up at a mall with 40 kids and the door open and said, y'all get off and go in the mall, how many of us would have been found where we're supposed to be? Every one of those kids got off the bus, went in the mall, got their hard hat, safety glasses, tools, and immediately went to work. And I think what was powerful with that, with the business partners that were helping us on this project, they saw our kids in a whole different light. And they saw, unfortunately, sometimes the news misrepresents our young people. And like you say, kids will do, if the expectation is A, they're going to do A. And so, this was a job site. This was, their classroom, and they loved coming to school. And now how powerful is that for a young person to say, I love coming to school? Now, what's also neat, think of the legacy of these young people that can go back with their kids 20 years and they're pointing this space out and say, hey, I helped build that. So it really motivates the kids. And I will tell you, every one of those kids that worked on that project had multiple job offers. Many of them would, if they chose to go to college, the companies were paying for you to go to college. So that's a true win-win. And speaking of the Fire Sprinkler Association, we now in Henrico County have the first in the country uh, lab to teach students how to install fire sprinklers. It is the only one in the country. And we also have the first, we build houses, our students build houses. We have the first house, we just put it on the market in the country that has a student installed fire sprinkler system in it.
That's amazing. And it's a monument, right? We were talking offline before this about the importance of celebration and monuments. And I think sometimes we lose something in the power of people being able to see accomplishment laid out in front of them. We talk about examples of humans who've done great things. We bring them into classrooms, but every person doesn't want to be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whomever. It's about, to me, what are the achievable milestones that you are able to lay out before you're 18 that give you that sense of confidence to explore and try. And that's one of the things I've been so fascinated about how you all are doing this, because it feels like it's a combination of experiential learning and an opportunity to have accomplishment when we know that kids today often do not have both of those experiences. And yet we ask them to go and accomplish incredible things. If you don't have reinforcing behavior, if you don't have reinforcing moment, it is so difficult to then turn around and feel like I can go do whatever it is that I want to go do.
You know, it's funny when I first started teaching, and that's been 4 years ago, you know, every teacher out there, you had to come up with your classroom rules. My classroom rules were very simple. There were 2 words that I would not allow to be used in my classroom. I can't. And that was my only classroom rule. And, you know, I remember my principal saying, look, you've got to have rules. I said, trust me, if you live with that, if you let me go with that, you'll be surprised where we can go. And I, you know, 40 years later, I still live with that same rule. I can't, it's not an option.
You know what's funny about that? You know, one of the best ways to help kids feel like they're a leader capable is tell them that they are. And if you look at, you know, what are considered the handful of, you know, the great prep schools, et cetera, their philosophy isn't that different than what you just said, which is don't tell me that you can't. You can tell me it's hard, but you're also going to tell me how you're going to get.
Yep.
And I think the more that we can build that type of resiliency into students to say, it may be hard, you are going to face hard things, but there are opportunities available to you if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to give yourself an opportunity to try. It's amazing how much you can shift a mindset for a student by just telling them that you can and you're able. Right. And then you kind of give them the real opportunity to do it.
Yeah. I mean, when we started Regency, I'll be honest with you, there were people, I mean, you think about 48,000 square foot of a mall that still had stores in there, and you're going to go in there and tear it all out and build it back. There were people that said, are you sure kids can do this? And literally, I remember looking at, and one time it was in front of kids. Somebody said something, you sure these kids can do this? I said, no, I don't think they can. I know they can. Now get out of the way. And that's, you know, what's the mindset. We're going to get, we might make mistakes getting there, but we're going to get there. You know, my daughter, when she's a math teacher actually, but she, growing up around me, obviously she thinks a lot. You know, we've got similar mindsets. I had to go into some of our classes and observe, because when you look at, you know, everybody talks about pass rate on SOLs and stuff like that. CTE students perform so much better than your average student. And I had her go in and observe and to see if she could just tell me from an outsider looking at why, you know, is it the belief? Is it the teacher pushing them? She said, whatever it is, at the end of the day, the difference is technically most of the time in a math classroom, if a student gets a wrong answer, they put their pencil down, raise their hand, and want somebody to come tell them what they did wrong. She said, intuitively, in the CTE world, if a kid gets a wrong answer, they go right back and start over again. They're not directed to do that. They know I was supposed to get X and I didn't. So let me go back and figure out what went wrong to get there. She said, so it's not that you're teaching difference. It is that problem solving, design, willing to go back and do it. And I joke about WD-40, you know, if we'd stopped at 39 times, we wouldn't have WD-40 right now. because it was the 40th try trying to get that fixed.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And I also like the idea that, one of the beauties of CTE is it defines an endpoint, right? You are trying to get to a place. And I think that there's only so many times you can solve a train coming from Birmingham to meet a train in Atlanta at X speed where it makes a difference to you in your life versus saying, hey, how do I think about structural load in a wall? And by the way, I also want to say something else about CTE. If you think that you're not doing advanced math and science to prep yourself for a career, you're incorrect. It's just a matter of inclination and desire, right? What you want to do. And for some kids, going on to then, become an engineer at, Virginia Tech is what they want to do. For some, they look at it and say, hey, there's a local career that makes sense, or I'm taking over a family business, or I want to start a business. I think that, the American dream is ensconced in the idea that you should be capable of using your talents and your ability, your education and your skill to be able to go out and do the things that feel interesting, fun, and accretive and good for you, your family, your community. And the idea that we're opening up pathways for kids to do all of those things, including, by the way, reinvest in small businesses, which, if you want to talk about long-term economic growth for America, is massively important, right? That matters a lot. I know I'm on my soapbox, but Mac, you got me going on this one this morning.
Well, the other thing with that too, a career in the K-12 world, we think of careers as a straight line. None of us have ever gone a straight line to get in our career pathway. There's a lot of entry and exit ramps that make us very good at what we do.
As someone who's a late in life ed techer who didn't come into this world until about 8 years ago, and 20 years ago was a baby investment banker on Wall Street who hadn't even thought of the idea that I think every teacher I've ever had has had a good chuckle at the fact that this is where I've ended, come into my career, and I'm never going to leave the industry because I love it. You know, it's never about A to Z. It's about the journey and what you can find and fulfilling. And I think that matters so much. I know we've been talking about CTE resourcing. Um, we're talking about this differently than we were doing so maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I think it's a healthy change. But as you now think about your year and you think about setting up for success for your kids every year and their long-term progression, right? We think about, you come into sixth grade. A lot of us have talked about in the past, the number one predictor of whether or not you go to college, whether or not your parents went to college, because someone can help you in fifth and sixth grade map out all the things that need to happen right through 12th grade to get you there. It seems like you are taking an approach of let's talk about, enrolled or employed or enlisted and having that conversation start productively in middle school to help kids understand what are the pathways to getting there. Can you talk about like what you're facing now as you think about CTE today versus maybe what you were thinking about 10, 15 years?
Well, that's one thing I tell people all the time. I've spent my career trying to rewrite the narrative about what it means to go to work. And I think somewhere along the way, we lost the meaning and just thought of, well, the pathway I have to go is elementary, middle, high school, college, and then we'll figure out work. I guess it's the engineering in me. I think what we've gotten to the point now, we've got to reverse engineer a career. So you got to think where you'd like to end up, look at all the pieces of that career pathway, and then find out where I fit. So we actually push all the way down to the elementary school level now, and trying to get students not to think, okay, you're going to be an electrician, but start to think on the big picture, like how does it work? Where does light come from? How does, so you start to understand all those components of that career pathway, and you might end up being an electrical engineer, nuclear engineer. You could be an electrician. You could be in sales. It's all those other pieces. But if you expose students to the vast array of opportunities in something they're interested in, and then let them find that piece, that niche that I'm good at, that I love and I enjoy, and somebody's going to pay me for. And so I think that's the shift that I've seen happen. And I'm really glad that narrative is starting to change where it's not just, okay, I got to get out of middle school to go to high school. I have to get out of high school to go to college. Now I think I know in Henrico, we want our students to be life ready. And so be prepared for whatever comes next and have a goal, have that. There's multiple ways to get to that goal. And I know I'm probably rambling now, but I think
No, no, no. You're not rambling. I love this.
we can't, I couldn't sit here and say, you're going to be an investment banker and then something comes alongside and gets you sidetracked. But if I open you know, think about the horses running, when they wear the blinders, they only see straight in front of them. And then all of a sudden something runs in front of them and they don't know how to deal with it. So take the blinders off, look at all live in that career pathway to find what that perfect niche in that pathway could be for you. Health and medical is, I think 8 of the 10 fastest growing careers right now are in the health and medical field, but not everybody's going to be doctors and nurses. Matter of fact, I can't see in the sight of a needle, so I pass out. So I would never, if you could send me to 8 years of medical school and the first time somebody pulls a needle, I'm hitting the floor. It just happens. But there's all these other pieces in the medical world, like repairing the high tech equipment that they use, or being able to use the ultrasounds for hearts and all those other pieces. So exposing the students to say, okay, it's more to medical than just doctor or nurses. You've got all these other opportunities out there. Find that niche. Find what you love.
Building on that, I think that, and now we're gonna expose our own, educational preferences along the way. As someone who benefited a lot from liberal arts education, and not in the I wanted to major in basket weaving, but more along the lines of let me get a chance to see and experience lots of different things. And I like the idea in elementary when, you know, curiosity, right? And I think curiosity to me is a underutilized skill that we can develop. And I think it is a skill, but to be able to systemically think about how does this work? What does this mean? What is this like in a way that allows you to explore, I think is so important. And I think what you're highlighting there is if you can expose for kids, some of whom will get it at home, some of whom school may be the only place where someone encourages them to think differently, to think more broadly about what they're capable of or what could happen. It's such an important part of the world in which we live. And I love the idea that you're saying, hey, in elementary school, when we're thinking about the basics of the colors or a prism, or thinking about how light moves or whatever else it may be, electrons move, and what's that have to do with the computer that's sitting in the front of a room? What an interesting and opportunity to help kids say, hey, as I think about a STEM pathway or a CTE pathway, I've actually had an opportunity to be curious and to explore. And I love that idea that we're thinking about CTE today as true exploration of passion, as opposed to you got to sign up for something on your way out the door.
We run programs during the summer actually, because I'm also a firm believer in try before you buy it. You don't. So, with a lot of these classes, you're making a commitment. So we run some summer exploratory programs for 3 weeks for both middle and high school students to come in and say, okay, I think I want to be an electrician. What does an electrician really do? So you get an exposure. Now, at the end of the day, you might find out, oh no, I do not want to be an electrician. But I guarantee at the end of the day, if your light fixture needs to be swapped out, you'll feel comfortable swapping it out just that 3-week class. So
YouTube, remember to, and if you're doing it at home, remember, always go to your panel and shut that off first.
absolutely.
I love that idea there. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And I also think that when we think about managing pathways, right, getting kids through more than one class is important. Having that summer exploration also helps manage the dabbler problem, right? Where I've done photography, done a little bit of but if I look at my actual pathway over 9 through 12 in particular, you want to see kids doing 3 and 4 classes, getting to that capstone experience, because that is, I think, really important in terms of having the discipline to go through the full exercise, and giving them that opportunity. One question that I think comes out of this for me is we talk about the interaction with families. We talk about the interaction of Henrico with the community. Obviously, you're working with business leaders. How has it been talking to parents to help them better understand the portrait of a graduate? Because I think that's obviously been a part of the success you found, which is helping parents buy into this idea of enlisted, enrolled, employed. What were the hurdles you went through to help bring that new portrait of a graduate to life?
You know, with parents, every parent out there wants a better life for their child. And unfortunately, historically, we've always thought the pathway to a better life was a 4-year degree. And that's just the way, I mean, it's the way we grew up. That's, if you're going to be successful, go to college. Um, but the world has changed. Business has changed. When you look at the number of jobs that are out there that require a 4-year degree, that has changed. So it was trying, while I've said I've worked really differently, I've put a lot of effort into changing the narrative about what people thought about career and technical education. That included the parents. And I think one of the most powerful things that we did, it actually went viral and across the country, really. We started the CTE letter of intent signing day back in 2018.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
You know, we all, if you're going to go to college, we celebrate that. Kids wear their jerseys to school. They put their names up on the board. Military, we'd do stuff for the military. But if you had that kid like myself that was just going to go to the world of work, if you ask them, what are you doing next year? They'd hang their head like, well, I'm just going to go to work. Like they did something wrong. And so we wanted to change that narrative so that kid was proud of that decision. And to do that, the CTE letter of intent signing day not only highlighted that young person's opportunity to take what they've learned in school and use it for a career pathway and jumpstart that career, but then we started, in the ceremony, we don't talk about how much money they're earning. We just talk about their benefits package. And we had students this year, we just did it a couple weeks ago. I mean, they're signing opportunities with companies where their benefit package is $35,000 a year just in benefits. And so when parents sit there and start hearing that and thinking that's more money than I make, and my child's happy, they love what they're doing. So it really kind of, it solved it's kind of like solving itself. It doesn't switch overnight, but people start to see, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it doesn't have to be college debt and all those other pieces. There's ways to get that where companies help pay for that.
And selfishly, you're building community contributors from the age of 18. And I think that, we can talk a lot about the democracy and elections or whatever else it may be. Having folks who are invested in their communities, invested in their families, for some of whom this is generational shift, right? Like it's life-changing opportunity for an entire family or parts of a community. It's incredible to think about how you can encourage that. And the idea that someone can walk proudly down the hall, kid going to Harvard, kid going to UVA, kid going to University of Richmond, kid going to community college, right? And dual enrolling, kid going right into industry. It doesn't really matter. They're all successful portraits of a graduate, just taking a different path that works for them. Removing that stigma means that every kid also has the right to feel proud about walking out the door. And I think what you're building for them is an incredible gift.
I had, I had a principal call me a few years ago, and said, look, I've got a young person that has been a straight A student, and all of a sudden their grades are tanking. Can you help? And I said, well, what's happened? He says, well, in reality, I think, and the principal's smart enough to see it. He said, I think the parents are pushing the kid to go to college and do this, and the kid just wants to be an auto mechanic. And so I said, well, I tell you what, let's do this. Let's meet with the parents and the student at one of our automotive labs. And so, and it was really funny. The father walked in and you could tell he's like, why am I here? It's kind of like, I'm going to pay someone to work on my car kind of mindset. But after standing there and I had the teacher there showing the young person, all the different stuff. And you could just see he lit up. The kid just got excited about being there. And so I was talking with the father and I said, he can go to college and be in this program. And I said, there's a lot of technical schools, automotive engineering, design schools, and stuff like that. And he goes, there are. And literally, this young person who had tanked his grades ended up his senior year, got into our program and completed not 1 year of automotive, but ended up doing both years, earned all of his ASE certifications, ended up going to a technical school and doing great because once again, the kid made up his own mind. You're telling me I'm going to go to college. I'll show you. I'm not going to go to college. And, he was solving his own problem, which, and then he realized what he was doing. But the parent, so that's the kind of message. Or I was at an event the other night that a mother came up to me. Her daughter had been in our communications class. And she said, I just got to tell you, the class changed her life. So the more I call them disciples, CTE disciples, they're out singing the praises of what the programs can do. So the more you do that, the more other people say, well, I want a piece of that too. How can I get involved? And, it's literally changing the image of what people think about CTE. It's not for those kids that can't learn. It's for all kids.
Mac, I'm gonna say something that's gonna embarrass you, but I'll just say it anyway. You are the type of educator that makes kids feel seen. I can think of my own educational experience. I was always young. I was a year young, right? I didn't skip a grade. I just started early, and I was in a highly competitive New England prep school, and I had two teachers, Mr. Guerra and Mr. Obellamia, who went out of their way to help me understand at a time I wasn't mature enough to understand it, the possibility and the ability that I had to get there. Because, when you're 12 with 13-year-olds and, you're not there, you're not ready. And I'll just say on behalf of a lot of students who I know have been impacted by your work, not only are you giving them pathways, you're giving them a chance to be seen. And education only works when you feel like you can be seen. And so, I just, after 40 years, I'm glad you didn't work for 40 years because if you hadn't, the students in Henrico would be missing a lot.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this question. You've been at this for 20 years. I know why you got into it, and it was your experience. Tell me why you're still here. What is it, the thing that you want to kind of, if you think about the epitaph of a career, what would you want it to say?
Well, I will go back to my mother again. When I used to come home from school with straight A's, most parents a lot of times say, great job here. Let me give you some money for your A's or whatever. My mom would look at me and say, okay, now what? And that's kind of how I've managed my career. I'm never there yet. And if anybody said, at the end of the day, I'm still asking, and now what? And, even in my own office, they joke about every time we get to what you think is a pinnacle of success, the next thing out of my mouth, and now we're going to do this because I'm always thinking, what's next? And, and I joke about this all when I was teaching electronics, to date myself a little bit, VCR repair was big business. And, if you could fix a VCR, you were guaranteed a good career, with good paying money for the time frame. But if that's what the students learn, how many of those students would be employable today? So, it's always, and now what? What's next? Where we go? So Regency Mall was a great project. I mean, our kids learned a lot, about 600 kids had high quality work-based learning experiences involved in it. And immediately came out of my mouth, and now what? And so we have the first building that I know of in the country. We built a 45,000 square foot addition where the second floor is shelf space intentionally. And our kids are now starting to build that out. So it's always, okay, you achieve this goal, and now what? And so at the end of the day, that's what I'd want to be known for. And now what? Because that's what life's all about. The minute you take your foot off the gas, you slow down.
I can't think of a better final word than that. And if we're not asking for ourselves and our students, and now what? Well, Max can come look you up after your questions, starting with, and now what for you? Mac, thank you. Director CTE for Henrico. Thank you so much for doing this. We're so happy to have you on Lessons Learned Season 2. Appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, y'all. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. And remember to ask yourself today, and now what? That wraps another episode of the Lessons Learned podcast. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more about Better Lesson, please visit betterlesson.com/podcast. Lessons Learned is hosted by Better Lesson, the leading provider of data-driven, high-impact, system-wide K-12 teaching and learning solutions. We partner with states and districts to support every educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners who are college and career ready. Our work has impacted more than 80,000 educators and nearly 3 million students nationwide. See you in the next episode.